Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the show. Here we are on Wednesday morning with Mr. Martin Popoff. Good morning, Martin.
Yes, morning, Pete.
And notice, everybody, I am saying good morning to Martin because it is early our time. So if you happen to be watching us in a different time, hey, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be.
It's our set time. We always do these in the morning. So.
That's right. So there's a reason for it. So don't read anything into that, please. So today we've got a cool show that Martin and I have been brewing for a little while. Again, it's another one of those fun shows that I don't think anybody needs to take too serious, but I think it's a cool concept because, quite frankly, this is something that is always, especially living in North America, we often get sidetracked and kind of channeled via the hit, okay? The radio staple, the radio hit. And I think a lot of people judge bands based on those hit singles. And a lot of instances, for the casual listener, those hit singles may maybe all they know from the band. So Martin and I were talking, we're like, well, how about those bands where we just really don't like the singles for the most part, but really love the bands? And so what we've done here is we've each picked 5 examples of bands we like, but we really don't care for the hits much. And I will say for most of mine, there are a couple of hits here or there where I don't mind, but for the most part, I'm not a big fan. And I absolutely think the better material was never released as singles. And we'll kind of get into each one here. So I'll have Martin kick us off with his first choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. And I like that you bring that up, how we get channeled that way, because in the UK, it's more so, or it's a different dimension where in the UK, they kind of measure a band's success by how the hit charted, how the single charted. And in the US and Canada, I mean, we kind of measure the success of bands talking about how many gold and platinum records they had, kind of thing. So it's a funny dynamic, but the hits are super important, and they it's an exercise in mind control by the labels and stuff, right? And radio, and hammering these things into you, and it's a big deal because the hit drags the album sales in a lot of cases. So yeah. And again, I guess this is a bit of a flip side of our, you only need the greatest hits of this band thing, right? So that was more love the hits, that was enough. But this is the opposite. So my first one, and these all have different reasons for them. But my first one is, where's my plaque here to show here? My first one is this band right here, Ted Nugent. So Ted Nugent is a funny case, and it fits it for the most part because, with our heavy bands, that's the other thing. With our heavy bands, the hits are going against the tide a little bit in a way, because radio and the label is trying to tell you, we got to put something out there that isn't doing exactly what you normally do. Like, we're actually trying to fool the people with heavy bands when it comes to hits in a lot of ways, right? Whereas if you're a mellow band like the Eagles or Fleetwood Mac or whatever, they just want the best version of what you normally do. So with Ted Nugent, that goes both ways, because with Ted, you get mellow songs, you get novelty songs, and you don't get the cool, heavy, good written songs, I think. So right off the bat, they had Where Have You Been All My Life, that little jazzy thing off the album that was put out as a single. Hey Baby was the main single, right? And that's more like a little it's like a little, I don't know, what do you call that music? Swing music almost?
Almost,
little
bit?
Yeah. Stranglehold, I mean, I get a lot of heck for this, but I'm not a huge Stranglehold fan, but that's the biggest Ted Nugent song of all time in a certain way, and that was a hit. But it's a little long, and it's slow and all that stuff. But Cat Scratch Fever, same thing. I don't think that's that great a written song, but it's a little bit of a novelty song because it's about venereal disease and all that, right? But I find the chorus annoying, and the riff is that little boogie, and the production and stuff. But they did Need You Bad, but they also did I Want to Tell You as a single, which is a cover of a Beatles thing, and it's a mellow tune. From Intense Cities, I think like more or less stuck out as singles were things like Jailbait, Land of a Thousand Dances, which I hate. And then you get Wango Tango off of Scream Dream, which is a novelty tune. So with Ted, they're saying, give us a mellow song, give us a novelty tune, give us a cover, all these things I don't really want out of my Ted Nugent. I mean, I like those 5 cool heavy, deep album tracks from every album kind of thing, right? And then later on, things are okay. I mean, Little Miss Dangerous, there's Tied Up in Love. Little Red Book, again, a cover that was put out, so that's it's novelty and it's a cover. And then the last one I want to mention is Fredbear. Everybody's always on about what a great song Fredbear is, right? You know, it's this classic off of Spirit of the Wild or whatever. I hate Fredbear. I love the lyrics, I love the sentiment of the whole thing, and that's cool, and it's a heartfelt story and all that stuff. But the riff is barely written. The music is just like this soft vanilla chordal rock thing. I think Ted's singing. I love Ted singing almost all the time, but on that one, he's a little, you know, a little out of tune. I think a little bit like he's not pushing a lot of air. So there's the last one I want to mention as sort of a hit that I thought was not very good. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of reasons there to put Ted Nugent in this camp.
Yeah, it's a good choice. It's a really good choice. Yeah, Ted's another one of those guys that for me, it's always been the deep tracks that really attracted me. Although I do like Stranglehold a lot, but for the most part, yeah, you look on any of those, especially the early albums and the early '80s albums. There's so many other great tracks kind of lumped in there, and then they're like, why did they release that as a single? It's like, and yet you got people who that's what they know, right? When it comes to Ted Nugent, so. Yeah. You're missing out, folks, if you're only paying attention to the singles. So and here's another perfect example of a band that totally falls in line with this. So Def Leppard is my first choice here today. So obviously, you know, everybody knows when they released this album, their second album, High and Dry, this was not the massive success that the two or three albums that came afterwards were. But of course, the first thing they released was Bringing on the Heartbreak, which is kind of like the album's lone anthemic rocker, right? But and I always kind of dug it. I always give that a little bit of credit. But you know, there's other stuff on here that's a hell of a lot more compelling, like You Got Me Running, Let It Go, No, 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 Mirror, Mirror. I mean, you know, a lot of really great stuff on here. But I think where the problems with Def Leppard started on Pyromania. Because of course, this was a massive album, and all of a sudden these guys became like a hit machine. But yet, you know, what did you hear on this album like all the time? You know, Photograph, constantly. Rock Till You Drop, Foolin', Rock of Ages. Again, maybe not terrible songs, but how do you ignore like Coming Under Fire, right? Billy's Got a Gun.
Yeah.
Die Hard the Hunter. I mean, these are all really good, strong songs that I think, for me anyway, a lot more interesting than some of these hits. But again, this is, you know, early '80s. This is North America. You know, what's selling right then? Those big sounding songs, right? And then you got this album, which comes out where, you know, does anybody ever need to hear Pour Some Sugar on Me again? It did big business, right? It's the worst song on this album, in my opinion. You know, Armageddon,
yeah. Yeah.
Women, you know, Animals, you know, Love Bites. I mean, it's just, this is like all of a sudden people gravitate towards, you know, Def Leppard as this big production, crazy hooks and ballads. And I think the band got swept up in that as well. And it's almost like they forgot who they were on this album, and certainly on Through the Night. So, you know, and how many people, when they think of Def Leppard, they only think about those, you know, 6, 7 really huge, enormous hits. And yet, you know, you've got some strong songs throughout like this catalog, and even later on, right? I mean, you know, most people go to see Def Leppard in recent years. Do they want to hear any of those songs from any of the later albums? Not really. Do they even want to hear like some deep tracks from this album? Maybe not. But you know what? You can't leave without playing Foolin' or Rock of Ages or Photograph or, you know, Pour Some Sugar on Me or all this other stuff. So I don't know. When I hear any of those hits, for the most part, and again, I'm not that I listen to radio much or anything like that anymore, but I turn it right off. I have no interest in I don't think those are some of the best songs. Are they the most accessible? Certainly. But are there better songs? I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You know, when it comes to Pyromania, 3 of 4 of those you mentioned, I thought were pretty decent songs on that record. But Photograph was the biggest song on that record, and I think is the worst song on that record. And what a great point about Bringing on the Heartbreak. I mean, it literally, that's where it starts right there. Yeah. And again, it's that whole idea of we need a single, we need to get you on radio, we need to fool the public and show them something that you just basically aren't, you
Yeah.
know, when you
And
when
it's
you do
just
the
interesting
ballad.
when you look at where Def Leppard came from, right? I think not only did the record company fool the public, but they also fooled Def Leppard into saying, all right, we want to be something different now. And I know like Joe has gone on record saying, well, we were never a metal band. We were never part of that scene. I'm like, dude, listen to your first two albums. I
Yeah.
mean, come on, you certainly were. And you know, I don't know. And again, they made a lot of money. So it's not like this whole formula didn't work for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've talked to plenty of people who love this band from the first album to the second album, and they're like, all right, I'm done. I mean, especially after this album and then the one after it, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Pyromania still is a great slice of accessible hard rock, right? I mean, you can't deny it's just so engaging, right? But again, I think they ignored some of the best songs from that album for me
Yeah.
anyway.
Cool. All right. Okay. So my second choice is this band right here, Queen. And I got a couple of hits packages out here to help me make my point here. We actually I did an episode of my podcast History in 5 Songs on, I called it Queen and Novelty, which is kind of on, the whole thing was on this topic. It was on novelty songs from Queen. But of course, I love this band so much, and they have a long catalog and they have a ton of hits. So I love a lot of the hits. But you know, my worst memories of anything to do with Queen are some of those hits, like Another One Bites the Dust, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Radio Gaga to some extent, although I like the melody of that one.
I do too.
But you know, and I'm looking at this, a lot of their hits I just love, like Somebody to Love and Fat Bottom Girls and Killer Queen. So they have a lot of amazing hits too. But even later on, well, even We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions is a little annoying too. It's definitely down the road of novelty, right? Bohemian Rhapsody is kind of a novelty song, but I like it, right? And then there's some John Deacon hits that are a little easy listening-ish. You know, You're My Best Friend. What else is kind of light from these guys? I mean, I love Bicycle Race. I love Spread Your Wings. Don't Stop Me Now. I kind of like Love of My Life is a Queen ballad. Play the Game is okay. But you move on into the 80s, where, you know, I'm not a big fan of most of those albums. There are some really annoying hits from those. You get the likes of The Invisible Man, The Miracle, even Headlong is a heavy song off of Innuendo. It was a heavy song, but it's up where Brian has kind of lost his mind in terms of being able to write a proper heavy song. It's almost like Brian, when he gets into that whole Hammer to Fall Forward heaviness that he would do later on, it's almost like he was writing for Paul Rogers, because he's lost the whole, you know, early super interesting Brian May, and he's kind of writing in this bluesy, chunky hard rock thing. And Headlong's a perfect example of that. I thought it was a heavy song, which you're welcoming from Queen, but it wasn't a particularly good single. But yeah, Who Wants to Live Forever? It's a Hard Life, just very housewifey sort of ballad. I Want to Break Free was okay. Under Pressure I thought was pretty good, but again, kind of novelty. So I guess the theme here, more so than Ted Nugent. I don't know how many people have ever compared it to Queen's hits, but anyways, we'll do it. A lot of novelty in both camps, but and then also a fair dose of the straight kind of syrupy balladiness, and then of course a lot of great hits as well that are great written songs. But even when there are these really good Queen well-written songs, interesting songs, maybe even genius songs, there's always a little bit of, this is made to be a single and it was a hit because it's novelty. It makes you laugh a little, haha. You know, there's something a little silly about it, or not particularly silly, but something that gets a cheap laugh. And you get that all through Bohemian Rhapsody. You get it on Killer Queen. You get it on Crazy Little Thing Called Love and Radio Gaga, you know, all this stuff. So sometimes they're playing a little bit to the cheap seats, I think, a little bit on that novelty thing, even though there's a lot of genius there. So yeah, there you go. I picked it as one of these because when I think of Queen and hits, it puts me a little bit in a bad mood because they're one of my favorite bands. So there you go.
And how many people only know Queen based on those hits.
Yeah.
Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, right? So there are some people who only know those hits and hate Queen because of it and don't know anything else they've done. And then there are the people that those are the greatest songs ever and don't even investigate the rest of the catalog.
Yeah.
You know,
Literally, their two biggest songs are a purebred rockabilly song and a purebred disco song. And probably their third biggest song doesn't have drums on it. It's stomping and clapping your hands, right?
yeah.
There you go.
I mean, you know, if you were to walk up to like 10 people out in the street somewhere and you were say, I want you to listen to this song, you play them Ogre Battle, they would have no clue who it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They would have no clue. All right. My next choice is a band that really doesn't have a lot of hits. They have very few, actually. But for whatever reason, I'm not really a fan of any of them. And I'm just stupefied every time I've gone to see this band live. And I'll even mention another band as an example of what I'm going to talk about here. Whereas it's like you've got a portion of the audience who obviously are big fans of the band and know everything they've done. And you got a portion of the audience that only shows up to hear those songs. And I honestly, one of the three that I'm going to talk about, I can kind of see the merits of. I don't need to ever hear it again. The other I've never been a fan of. And then the third is a pretty cool kind of pop song, but it's just not representative of the band. I'm talking about Yes. Okay. So of course their first big hit was Seen All Good People, which is kind of Yes is doing this kind of like boogie type of thing, which is not what Yes does, but they kind of struck gold with that. And it's like, you can't have a Yes performance now without them playing that. When Yes launches into that, when I go see them live, I'm generally kind of looking to do something else or maybe go to the bathroom or something like that. Roundabout is the other one. All right. And I get the attraction of Roundabout. I think it's a well-constructed song. It's got a lot of really good parts. But again, it's almost like for so many people, Roundabout is like the greatest thing ever. And the other one is Owner of a Lonely Heart. Those really, they have a couple other minor hits, but those are the big ones. Owner of a Lonely Heart, again, right place, right time. Yes, in the 80s, doing something completely different, massive hit. Now, unfortunately, you know, you've got the band all these years later who are still out there playing with a vastly different lineup than the one recorded that, and they still have to play that song because it's, I think, the biggest hit sales-wise they ever had. And you can tell like half the guys in the band probably are not interested in playing it at all. And I'm not interested in hearing it at all. So, and I think the other point I wanted to make is that these three songs, I've seen Yes a ton of times. And I'm going to mention Blue Oyster Cult in a second as an example of what I'm talking about here. It's like, it's ingrained in so many kind of casual fans, or even people who maybe don't even consider themselves a Yes fan, that those are the best and greatest songs they ever did and the only ones worth hearing, and that those three songs are representative of what Yes's work is as a whole, which it's not. And I've gone to so many Yes shows over the year where you have, you know, like I said, you've got maybe 40% of the audience, maybe even more, who have no interest in hearing Close to the Edge, have no interest in hearing And You and I, or something off of Topographic Oceans, or, you know, whatever, Machine Messiah, whatever it might be. And yet they wait that entire concert. They're sitting there on their phones. They're going to the bathroom, going to the bar, talking to their whoever they came with, whatever. And as soon as those opening notes of Roundabout kick in, they go bonkers. All of a sudden, yes, my $80 was well spent. They're going to play Roundabout tonight. That made it work. That's the only reason why I came. And I remember specifically like going to see Yes at Madison Square Garden. I don't know, maybe in the early 2000s or late 90s. I don't remember when it was. The later version, John Anderson was still in the band. And they played Roundabout, and they played it like reggae style. And I was like, what in the world is this? I was like, A, I don't like this song that much anyway as it is, because I've heard it too many times. And B, it's like now they're going to do it reggae style. I was like, it's not working for me. The reason I bring up Blue Oyster Cult too, because another perfect example of a band who has one massive hit, one or two other minor hits. So we're talking about Godzilla Burning for You, and of course, Don't Fear the Reaper. And I remember like the last time I saw Blue Oyster Cult, it was at a smallish kind of theater, like maybe, 1,500 seater or something like that. It's a couple, like 2 years ago. And they played a lot of like really strong, deep album cuts and a lot of their kind of album classics that the, hardcore fan would know. But man, I got to say, probably half of the people in the audience that night, whether they were wives of the husbands who came along or just people who only really know Blue Oyster Cult because they like those hits. Maybe they live locally. They decided to plunk down the $50 to go see the show, who, and I always watch this sort of thing. And I'm like, throughout the set, they're playing all these cool, like deep album cuts. And these people are just like sitting there dumbfounded with their hands under their asses, holding their phones and doing whatever. And then late in the show, dun, 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 they rip into, and then the place went berserk. And I think like 60% of the audience all ran down to the front of the stage, husbands dancing with their wives, having the time of their lives, throwing up balloons. And I'm like, so basically you came here all night, you spent your hard-earned money to sit on your cell phone for an hour and 15 minutes just to hear that one song.
Yeah.
And so my point of this whole thing is that Yes is so much more. There's songs on here that could have been hits. You've got Fragile, you've got, all right, Roundabout's the big song, but you know what? South Side of the Sky, really good, accessible song. You got The Longer Heart of the Sunrise, which I know the hardcore fans love. Long Distance Runaround, Yours Is No Disgrace from this one. Starship Trooper, good song, not necessarily single-ish because it's really long. Parallels. You got Awaken, Turn of the Century is a lovely song. Shit, you got songs from Drama that I think could have been singles that they never bothered to release. So it's just a shame for me that when the casual fan thinks of Yes, they only think of those three songs. And I think that's, a serious injustice to the band and their repertoire.
Yeah. And also with Yes, you've got America was a bit of a hit, and that's a cover.
It's right? A cover, yep.
The Clap is Yes, right? It's not Steve Howe solo. It's a Yes song officially. So that's like a bluegrass instrumental by the guitarist. And you've got Leave It, which is a barbershop quartet song. So that's like a novelty song, right? And that was, the second hit. Right? They had a couple. Changes was a hit off of there too, a little bit, right? But yeah, and I think of the Big Generator album, and I think the title track, Big Generator, right? It's
Love Will Find a Way was actually the
Love Will Find a Way, yeah. So that's a little sappy for Yes, right? Yeah. So it's funny, yeah. Always there's the ulterior motive part that is always a little annoying with hit singles, I suppose, a little bit, right? Yeah. The other thing I hate about the hit single thing live is when you get a band that just knows it's their big song and they just play it up and vamp up this long intro to it, and you're there, you don't even want to hear the hit, you're one of those kind of fans, right? You don't even want to hear the hit at all, and then they just extend it, and one that comes to mind always is Heaven and Hell, right? This long boring intro to Heaven and Hell before you get going on and on and on, and like 5 minutes later Ronnie starts singing the first verse or whatever, right? Oh man, I hate when bands do that. All right. Okay, so my next one is this band right here, Aerosmith. It's funny, you and I talked about them a little bit before, and when it comes to the 70s, there's less of a case made for this, but there's a bit of a case because I would say that before we leave the 70s, I was never a big Dream On fan, but here they are again. It's the mellow song. It's the mellowest song really of, you've got Seasons of Wither and Spaced, I suppose, and Home Tonight, right? Off of Rocks. But it's it's an early mellow song, and it was a hit, so I'm not crazy about that. Train Kept a Rollin' is a cover, and that was a little bit of a hit, so I don't want to hear a hit. You See Me Crying, here we do the ballad thing again. We're starting to get the ballad pathology, which gets really bad with Aerosmith later, right? But Home Tonight. Last Child, one of my least favorite songs off of Rocks, was the single, and that's kind of like a slow, funky one. I love every song on the album more than that, including Home Tonight, actually. But even that was a bit of a single. they had a bit of a single with the with Come Together, off of, I think, just the live. There's only a live version, right? But here, you know, it's a novelty song even for the Beatles. Now it's double novelty because it's Aerosmith covering the Beatles doing this weird wacky song, right? But then things get really bad, starting with the likes of Angel and the Song Doctors coming in, and the horrible rote ballads, which is, you know, earns Aerosmith a spot on here, even though I'm not making the case hugely for the 70s. But you know, a throughput through like Angel, Janie's Got a Gun. I don't mind Ragdoll. I don't mind Lovin' an Elevator, but What It Takes. And then you're into the, you know, the depths of despair with the likes of Crying, Crazy, Amazing. Pink is kind of stupid. I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Horrible, horrible song. Hole in My Soul. Awful, jaded, brutal. So, you know, Fly Away From Here, Sunshine, Girls of Summer. I don't even remember what Girls of Summer sounds like, but I kind of liked Walk on Water, Deuces Are Wild. There's these odd little weird things they put out just to try get a single. And they kind of ride that line between, you know, this really good quality of Aerosmith pop hard rockiness that they could get up to. But the magic is few and far between later on, even with the deep tracks, of course. I mean, everybody kind of puts down all those albums after Pump, everything moving forward, right? But they truly earn a spot on this list because of just the horrendous travesty of all these awful Song Doctor ballads all in a row, worse than any other band who ever did this, right? There's no other band that can compete with Aerosmith for doing that. So there you go. Love the band, hate the hits.
Yeah. And yet there are so many people that came on board the Aerosmith train with all those hits, right? And they will defend that stuff till the day they die.
Yeah.
Well. All right. My next choice here is none other than the mighty Judas Priest. And I will preface this because I know what some people are probably thinking. They're probably thinking, Pardo, or do you really just not like these songs, or are you just tired of hearing them? I will go on record as saying that even back in the day, because I've been listening to Judas Priest for a long time, I never liked Breaking the Law. I never liked Living After Midnight. I never liked You've Got Another Thing Coming. I never liked United. I probably warmed up to Turbo Lover a little bit, even though I think it's still kind of silly.
Wow,
Heading Out to the Highways of Decent Enough Song. Never liked Take on the World. And I think Some Heads Are Gonna Roll, which, you know, again, they didn't write that song, and kind of a poor choice for a single.
Diamonds and Rust.
Yeah, Diamonds and Rust. Yeah, exactly. You know, I don't mind. I mean, Diamonds and Rust is a good cover, I think well done. But I mean, you know, they had so many other choices that could have been singles. And I think what burns me up sometimes about a lot of this sort of stuff we're talking about is now, like when you go see the band live now, all this shit, people like it. That's great. I'm using shit, you know, not seriously here, but a lot of these songs like clog up the set list. Right? What about all this great deep cut stuff? And I get a lot of these bands are into doing the nostalgia thing, and that's what the majority of the people want to hear. But, you know, for me, when I go see Judas Priest and I've got to sit through, you know, the majority of those songs I just mentioned, I'm like, when's the good stuff coming? Right? I mean, you know, how about let's hear a little Out in the Cold, right? Or how about let's hear a little Jawbreaker or the Sentinel, which I know they, you know, are heavy duty. I know sometimes they throw these songs out there, but, you know, we get the same old all the time. You know, I mean, how many great songs are on this album? Yet we maybe hear, you know, Electric Eye, title track. And of course we got to hear You Got Another Thing Coming. You know, this album gets a little flack from a lot of people because it's a little, you know, not quite as heavy, but there's some really good songs on here that they never bother to tackle anymore. And don't even get me started with this, because I mean, come on, Rapid Fire, Metal Gods, The Rage, Grinder. I'd love to hear any of those songs over what they normally play on here. And I just think it's just, I know a lot of people are trapped in that whole nostalgia thing. And I know a lot of people, like bands because of the singles, because that's, you know, there's a lot, I mean, Martin, there's a lot of people who are not album people, right? They never bought LPs, they never bought cassettes, they never bought CDs. They just like what they hear on the radio, and for them that's good enough. But, you know, do those people, do they not care that they're maybe missing the best material ever? And it's like, did they ever stop to think that maybe these hits that were kind of force fed you through the radio and MTV and all that stuff, that those aren't the best songs on the album? And I know a lot of people like to argue, well, the reason why the record label chose those songs is because they are the best songs. And I disagree most of the time. You know, it's very rare that I will agree with that. You know, we talked about the Police recently, right? And for me, one of the things I like so much about the Police catalog is that the hits sound like all their other songs. They're all kind of the same. They happen to be the best tracks on the albums, but those songs fall in line with everything else that's on those albums. Whereas a lot of instances of what we're talking about here, these hits that radio promoted that were released as singles, in a lot of cases, I mean, you know, you can even talk about like Extreme and Mr. Big, right? Who they have these like monster ballads that sound nothing like what the rest of the albums are. And people go like, oh, I love that song. And they go buy the album. They're like, oh, this is not like More Than Words. And before you know it, they're no longer really fans. They don't buy any of their other stuff. And it's like, it misrepresents, I think, what are so great about a lot of these bands. And for me, I know a lot of people love Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight. You Got Another Thing Coming, but that's like kind of like happy, you know, anthem. That's not the Judas Priest I like to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple things I would add is that I think, what was it called? Bye Bye Johnny or Go Johnny or whatever. Like that
Johnny
was a
Be
hit.
Yeah.
Johnny Be Good. Yeah, they just called it Johnny Be Good. That's right.
Yeah.
So that was put forward as a hit, which is one of the low points of Priest's entire career.
Probably the worst thing they ever recorded. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to put that out. So that was a hit. I think Before the Dawn might have been pushed a little bit as a single. And on Turbo, I think Parental Guidance was kind of pushed as a little bit of a radio track.
They did a video for that, I think. Yeah.
And that's the worst song in the entire album. You know, I take a little issue with, I think Turbo Lover's a pretty well constructed song. I think it's one of the better ones on the album, but yeah, when I compare, there's Parental Guidance and there's a couple other really bad ones on there. Hot Property, is that what it's called? And I don't know if that was put out as a single or whatever, but I agree. Living After Midnight, we were horrified when that came out, when hearing that for the first time. Although now when I think about it, it's funny. Like Living After Midnight has a heavy verse and a really poppy chorus, and Breaking the Law has more or less a heavy chorus and kind of a poppy turn of melody for the Breaking the Law is semi-heavy. It never rubbed us the wrong way so badly back then. But yeah, that's quite a track record of some, because You Got Another Thing Coming, man, I just do not like that song at all. You know, that's quite annoying. So yeah.
I don't know. I don't really have a use for any of those songs. And for me, I'd like to hear, you know, they've done a good job in recent years when you go see Priest live of digging out some cool, you know, little diamonds in the rough, right? Songs that they don't normally play live. And you can tell just by you sit and you look around and, you know who the diehard fans are, and you know who the fans are that they're just waiting to hear those three songs we just mentioned. And, you know, Dissident Aggressor, like, what the hell is this? Right. You know, they start playing these great nuggets from the early days and people are just not interested.
Yeah.
They want to hear those big songs. That's the reason why they came.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So my next choice is this band right here, Twisted Sister. This is a very concentrated and good choice for this because there's not a lot of hits, and the hits are really truly quite annoying. So, you know, they only put out let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 albums, right? Of original material. Later there was the Christmas album and that as well, but their big hits are We're Not Gonna Take It, which is very annoying, and it lines up so well with like Come On Feel the Noise. I mean, sometimes I even forget that it's actually not a cover. We're Not Gonna Take It. It's just so written down to like an adolescent level and so dull, and nothing happens in it. And it's just got this annoying chorus and blah blah blah. I Wanna Rock is not so bad, but it's down the list of even my favorite songs on Stay Hungry. I Am I Me is quite annoying, so that's going back to a fairly heavy album, and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. But it is a little bit of like the precursor to We're Not Gonna Take It. But then they really, you get up to like the likes of Be Cruel to Your School and Leader of the Pack, the cover of that. You know, this is when they just like fell off a cliff and just decided we're primary colored. We're getting out our crayons. You know, forget the metalheads. It's just been a deep dive. I mean, the first 3 albums, I actually like all 3 of them quite a bit, but you get to the last two and they've fallen off a cliff. And You Want What We Got is just like this bad hair metal song. And then there is the obligatory ballad, God Love 'Em. Dee and the guys never wrote a lot of ballads, but The Price was a hit. And then probably the worst hair metal song of all time, off of one of the worst hair metal albums. We just posted an episode of The Contrarians where we do the secondary show called Worst Album, and we just did Love Is for Suckers, just went up this morning. So we're talking all about just that album, and Hot Love is on there, and Hot Love was kind of pushed as a bit of a single, and it's just this complete hair metal travesty, right? So really good case for Twisted Sister. I mean, all of these songs, there is somewhat, on the Greatest Hits album, there's things like Shoot 'Em Down, Run for Your Life, Ride to Live, Live to Ride. Not bad. You Can't Stop Rock and Roll is a pretty good anthem, but you look at all the biggest hits and all the songs pushed by the label into our faces as potentially biggest hits, and they're the worst Twisted Sister songs kind of there ever were. So there you go.
Cool. Yeah, I would kind of agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Agree with that. All right, so my next pick, Martin's probably not going to like this one, but my next pick is the Grateful Dead. And
all right,
and I kind of picked this one for a reason, because I know we talked about the Grateful Dead recently, and Martin actually probably likes a lot of the stuff that I'm going to kind of crap on a little bit here.
Yeah,
so,
I think I included them in the hits are my favorite songs thing, right? Well,
yeah.
actually, just because the most commercial things they ever did aren't my favorite songs.
Yeah. There's a lot of Grateful Dead songs that were released as singles, but I'm mainly kind of touching on those, the really successful singles, the ones that you still hear on FM classic rock radio today that they just kind of like jam down your throat, right? So we're talking about, Truckin' and Casey Jones and Touch of Grey, and even, I don't mind Sugar Magnolia, but it's, those couple songs it's like all you ever hear. And I get it. You can't release, like, as a single, a big, long, rambling Grateful Dead jam, right? You just can't do it. However, I think there are some songs on a lot of these albums, and, we're specifically talking probably from the early 70s through to the late 70s, but even the latter period stuff. I mean, Fire on the Mountain, all right? I believe that was released as a single, possibly. Never a song that's played, though. Shakedown Street should have been a really big hit. It wasn't. Again, there's some songs, like also Samson Delilah from Terrapin Station, right? There's a couple songs on this album. And then, how about like Help on the Way and Slipknot off of Blues for Allah, Franklin's Tower, for crying out loud. I mean, these are songs that, like, if you go, I never saw the Dead proper back in the day, but I've seen like Further a couple times and some different iterations. And these are songs that are like really fun to hear live. They're catchy. They have good groove to them, lots of nice hooks, a little bit of instrumental stuff. But I think most people, again, we're talking about, the general public, they hear mostly when they think of the Grateful Dead, they think of, stuff from these two albums, which is more of the Dead doing that kind of like country rock Americana type of thing, sort of, right? A lot of little bluegrass and country and folk influences. Ripple, Friend of the Devil, Boxer Rain, all really, really good songs. And I get frustrated when, again, not that I listen to FM rock radio all that much anymore, almost never, but I have plenty in my life. And when it's like, you're in the mood to hear something by the Grateful Dead, they're like, oh, here, we're going to play the Dead for you. Here's Casey Jones, or here's Truckin', or here's, and Touch of Grey is kind of a catchy song, right? But there were other really good songs on that album. And I guess it's just like, it's a matter of what the record labels decide to release as singles and what the people actually gravitate towards to make them successful. And I guess those songs are short enough, simple enough, have just enough hooks to make people, want to hear them over and over and over again. And I think, the Grateful Dead have a lot of albums, and granted, like I'm saying, I know there's a lot of people who don't like them because of a lot of the reasons why I do like them. But I think that those hit singles are not really representative of some of their best stuff. And maybe, Martin, as a fan of the more accessible Grateful Dead, you can talk a little bit about how maybe, like, agree or disagree that some of these hit singles from these albums that you really dig, they could have made better choices and picked some other stuff.
Yeah, I just want to mention one actually. I think the song France is a masterpiece of pop beauty. I mean, that song could have been the biggest smash single in all rock history. It's so gorgeous, right? It's funny. I was gonna send you Manic Street Preachers. Your Love Alone Is Not Enough as an example of the most beautiful written little pop jewel, and it's heavy actually at the same time, like loud and noisy. But then I thought, I'm not gonna send Pete music. That's ridiculous, right? But soon as you started talking about that and great songs that weren't on there, I thought of that Manic Street Preacher song and France. I mean, France, I just listen to that, and it's complex, but it's just so gorgeously constructed and melodic. And there's a bunch of those, and you mentioned a few of them. So there are a lot of their other songs that are accessible that weren't put out as singles. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And how many people out there who may be watching today hate the Dead because they can't stand those couple of songs, right? But because they don't like that, because that's what was kind of force fed and played on the radio, that they never bothered to go seek this band out and listen and give anything else a chance. Because I think there's a lot of stuff in their repertoire that really deviates from, Casey Jones or Touch of Grey or Truckin', right? That are not like that at all.
Yeah.
That might appeal to some people who like maybe a little bit more experimental music, maybe like something a little bit heavier, maybe something like some a little bluesier. Like certainly the first couple albums are just total like psychedelic blues rock, right? And nothing like what we just talked about. So it's like, I think that period in the band's history, and I'm talking specifically these two, was really when radio and the labels really kind of jumped all over the Grateful Dead to say, okay, we can make this band, turn these guys into a hit machine somewhat. And I think they overlooked a lot of other great gems from their catalog that they could have done the same with and opted not to.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Okay. So my last choice for the day is this band right here. David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth. And here's my A Little Ain't Enough tablature book. Kind of cool. And then probably a lot of people don't see this one. There's another tab book, The Best of David Lee Roth for Guitar.
Wow.
And you look at those names of songs on there, right? So the problem with David Lee Roth and why he's on this list is because of this. Crazy from the Heat, right? So I'm not a big fan of the whole catalog anyways. I mean, there's not a lot of deep tracks that are amazing anyways. I mean, Hina, I always point out as one of my favorite songs, but they're on this list. He's on this list because of the likes of Just a Gigolo and California Girls to kick things off, right? This stupid camp EP with those videos. It's like everything that you were starting to get annoyed that he started to do in Van Halen. He just went times 10 on those two songs when he decided to be a solo artist, right? So those are probably two of the worst things you would even want out of the whole catalog, and they're two of his biggest hits. But also Just Like Paradise, which is a really poppy, simple, housewifey ballad or pop thing, not a great song. And then even covering Tobacco Road off of the first one, I do not like very much, because I don't want to hear this rote predictable blues. I don't want to hear a cover. What do we got here? What was the other one? Tobacco Road and Yankee Rose are both kind of the same thing together. I mean, they're kind of the similar songs. So one's an original and one's a cover. I think I'm getting that right? And they're both like really dull, like badly written. That's Life is on here. So another camp tune that was kind of played on the radio a lot. Going Crazy is on here. So you got your Going Crazy on this one, and you're Just Like Paradise, which are just these kind of really pandering poppy, weak production poppy songs. And then the rest of the albums are the heavy deep tracks, more or less. So yeah, there you go. I mean, I'm looking at a track list of a greatest hits album. Yeah, so Just a Gigolo is a medley with I Ain't Got Nobody, which I totally never need to hear again. Sensible Shoes was a later ballad, which is just another stupid kind of bluesy pop song. Ha funny lyric. Hot Dog in a Shake which was also not a great one. I think that was pushed forward as something. She's My Machine is a rare heavy one that was kind of put forth as a single, but I believe that was put forth because it was on the hang on, is that on My Filthy Little yeah, so it's on this. He also had something that was put forward on the Greatest Hits album, as you know, when they put a non-album track just to help sell it. But She's My Machine is the first track on this totally mellow, horrible album, but it's a heavy one, right? Which is kind of odd. So it bucks the trend. But yeah, so add it all up, and probably like 7 of my least favorite 11 David Lee Roth songs were his singles. So there you go.
Yeah. And for me, I think the only album of his solo album, which I like, here's my thing. I think the Eat 'Em and Smile album has moments of brilliance on it. And with that lineup, it should have been a can't miss. But like 25% of that album is just like throwaway stuff. The rest of it kicks ass. And I'm like, man, I've always thought that he wasted what could have been the most lethal band ever.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're just some ridiculous singles and those videos. Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy stuff. All right. I saved the best for last because this is by far the band where, to me, the hits are just not representative of this band for the most part. But yet there's a catch here, because this band has 2 kind of separate eras that are completely different from each other. I'm talking about Genesis. All right. So there's the Genesis of the 70s, and then there's the Genesis of the 80s into the 90s. And they couldn't be any further apart from each other. And it presents a problem. So I'm going to kind of go back a little bit first. So not a big singles band early on, right? But once Peter Gabriel left the band, they had like, I think one, maybe 2 singles with Gabriel on board, but they didn't do any kind of business. So it wasn't until Peter left the band and Phil Collins came up to the vocal front that they started to dabble in a little bit more accessible music. So, on this album here, they released a single called Your Own Special Way. This is the Wind and Wuthering album, which was kind of a nice, kind of poppy, folky song, right? Very different from everything else on this album. Sticks out like a sore thumb, but decent enough, got some hooks, show that the band could do something different than what they've been doing. All right. And then on this album, so Steve Hackett leaves the band, so it's down to the 3-piece, right? And they put out this single called Follow You, Follow Me, which again, decent enough pop track, doesn't sound like anything else on this album. And that's, so all of a sudden, I think the band, and certainly Phil, gets it in their heads that, we can write stuff like this. And then they put out this album, Duke, and then you got 2 singles on this album. You got, and that were fairly, decent hits. You got Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again. All right. Although both kind of rock in a way, right? But again, a lot of these songs I've mentioned so far, not really representative of the larger scope of music. But again, the record label found some ways to take this band from, maybe selling 100 or 200,000 copies to going gold, and then maybe a little bit more so. And then we move on to, stuff like Abacab and stuff like the self-titled album and Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance, right? Where all of a sudden now you've got songs like No Reply at All and Man on a Corner, Mama. Abacab and Mama, pretty good. I think that retains a good amount of the prog from the 70s. They're still a bit interesting and dramatic. That's All, Taking It All Too Hard, loads of ballads, Illegal Alien, Just a Job to Do, Invisible Touch, Tonight, In Too Deep, Land of Confusion's okay, I like that. Then you got Throwing It All Away, No Son of Mine, I Can't Dance, which is like the worst song they ever did, Hold On My Heart, Jesus He Knows Me. I mean, you got songs like, there's other stuff on these albums. Keep It Dark is a terrific song. All right. Nobody paying attention to that. You got Domino, there's plenty of other songs on these albums that I think were worthy of attention, but all of a sudden You've got Genesis is huge, especially here in North America, but in a lot of parts of the world, enormous. And all of a sudden they're known for all these ballads and these kind of pop rock tunes. And it's a lot, in a lot of cases, you got Phil Collins also has a very successful solo career going at the same time. And the lines are blurred between what is a Genesis song and what's a Phil Collins solo song, because they kind of they're almost interchangeable, right? And it's just crazy how, and I know the Brits love to argue with me on this. They've been doing it for years about how, they insist that over there, that Genesis fans love all the eras. Okay. And there's no discrepancy there. It's like we love this band, whether it's the early stuff or the later stuff. And because I often talk about how in North America, if you were to go walk down a busy street in a metropolitan city anywhere in this country, and you ask 10 people, 9 out of 10 of them have probably never heard Watcher of the Sky, Supper's Ready, Fountain of Salmacis, Battle of Epping Forest. I can name any other track from the early Peter Gabriel stuff. And probably 9 out of 10 of them don't even know that Peter Gabriel was ever in the band, and probably would say, if you named a Phil Collins song, solo track, would probably think that was a Genesis song, and really don't know anything else. I'm talking to hit in this country, don't know anything else but all these hits. And again, they became massive because of these hits, so I totally get it. But on the 80s albums, there are other things on those albums that I think are as good, if not better, than the singles. And I think because they have so many of these singles later on, that the early part of the catalog just gets completely washed over and forgotten by people here who claim to be Genesis fans. And again, I know the folks in the UK love to argue with me on this point, but you don't know what it's like here. You go see Genesis here, people just want to hear the newer, I can't call it newer because they're old now, but all those 80s and 90s hits, that's what they want to hear. They're not interested in hearing stuff off of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway or stuff from Foxtrot or Nursery Crime or any of those sort of things. I mean, that they want those hits. And I think Genesis, to me anyway, and again, it's all about what Martin and I think here today, Genesis to me were such an important part of the progressive rock scene coming out of the UK in the 70s. And I think it's totally cool that they made the big time and they made a lot of money and became successful and opened up, their music to millions and upon millions of other people. But I still think that early part of the catalog is so overlooked in favor of the hit machine that Genesis became. I'll end my rant there.
Yeah. And like the worst 5 minutes across the entire Genesis catalog is I Can't Dance and the chorus to Invisible Touch. That, as soon as I hear the word Genesis, that incessant, insipid chorus of Invisible Touch pops into my head, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe third would be the chorus to Illegal Alien, right? We've been so beat up by the industry, hearing those songs over and over and over again. That's it's a good choice. And it's funny, your 70s choice proves that other whole thing, like give us something that you guys aren't, right? And then so it's the ballads then, and then it becomes just this weird pop that he got into, right?
Yeah. And it's like, and two, I think another aspect here as well, and maybe we haven't spoken to these people enough on the show today, is for those of you who really are only familiar with the hits and you don't like those hits, 9 times out of 10, those people are not going to investigate anything else. And the sad part is that for all those people that are not willing to go any further because they hate these songs we're talking about today, there's a good chance that they may like some of that other stuff that wasn't a hit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how often does that happen?
Yeah. Exactly. That's why this is Hate the Hits, Love the Band, right? So.
Yeah. There's a lot more to them, right? So, and for anybody watching who really likes these hits, that's totally fine. I mean, that's obviously, these are the bands and the hits that kind of irk us because we like the rest of the catalog so much. And I just feel like in a lot of cases, these hits are not really representative of what these bands are all about. So if all you know are these hits, you're really missing out. If you don't like these hits, try some of the other stuff. You might like it. If you love the hits and love the deep cuts too, that's perfect. That's actually, in a perfect world, that's the way it should be. But, these hits kind of irk the both of us. That's why we chose them today. So,
right.
So there you have it, everybody. So feel free to list your hate the hits, love the band in the comments below. I'll be really curious to see what we see today from this one here. So, you know, but we've got another really good show coming up for you on Friday. Worst follow-ups to mega albums. In other words, a band that had a huge record, could be a debut, could be something they did later on, right? Made all sorts of money, singles, top selling albums, tours, whatever. And then when the next one came around, bloop, down the toilet it went. So we've each got 5 of those to talk about on Friday. So stay tuned for that. Martin, what's up on the book front?
Nothing much. Well, I do get the Sweet book. That's coming in the next few days. Rebel Rouser, a sweet user manual. So martinpopoff.com for all that. And yeah, got the podcast. I guess I got to do a new episode. Had one just go up yesterday of History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. And yeah, more stuff coming down the pipe. It's going to get busy with the Nazareth coffee table one, but mainly the next big one is the 3rd and final of the Rush trilogy. So yeah, martinpopoff.com for all that.
Lots of good stuff. Cool. All right, everybody. So thanks for watching. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned for tonight for a really cool show. We've got some special guests. We're going to talk about the 80s live metal scene in different parts of the country here in the U.S. So I've got someone from Hitman, someone from Armored Saint, and someone from Metal Church joining us tonight to have that discussion. So stay tuned for that and a lot more on the channel. For Martin Popoff, I'm Pete Pardo. See you all later. Bye-bye.